The boy who couldn't climb it was a quiet morning in Venice Beach. The sun had just begun to rise, casting soft orange light on the boardwalk. The waves rolled gently onto the sand, and joggers passed by with earbuds in and coffee cups in hand. No one noticed the small boy in the wheelchair sitting just outside the broken wooden steps of a beachfront café. His name was Elijah, and he was 7 years old. Elijah didn't speak much. He never had. The doctors said his spinal injury at birth had affected more than just his legs. It had quieted something deep inside him, a kind of soft music that most children had when they laughed or ran through sprinklers. He watched the other kids every morning as they went up the 3 steps into the café. They came back down with croissants and chocolate milk, giggling, full of energy and sunshine. Elijah just sat there, staring at the steps like they were mountains. His mother, Lila, always packed his breakfast. She worked nights at a local diner and didn't have the money for treats or outings. Still, she made sure to bring him here. After her shift, this place, even though he couldn't get inside, gave him a sense of the world. The smell of baked bread, the clink of cups, the soft jazz playing inside. It made him feel part of something, even if from the outside. What no one knew, not even Lila, was that someone had been watching. Keanu Reeves had been sitting at the far side of the cafe every morning for the past week. Not as a celebrity, not as a millionaire, but just as a man looking for peace. He wore sunglasses and a hoodie, blending in with the crowd. He watched the boy each morning, watched how his fingers tightened on the armrests when he saw the other kids climb the steps, how his eyes lit up when someone held the door open for a stranger, how his mother would wipe her eyes when she thought no one was looking. Keanu was a man familiar with loss. He had tasted grief in all its colors, and now, in the quiet ache of that boy's silence, he recognized something, a loneliness he once knew. On the 4th morning, as he left the cafe with his coffee in hand, Keanu slowed down near the steps. He pretended to tie his shoe right near Elijah. When their eyes met, Keanu gave a soft nod. Elijah blinked once, then looked away. Lila smiled politely, but didn't say much. She was used to strangers being kind without meaning it. That evening, Keanu couldn't stop thinking about those steps. He had the means. He had the time. And more than anything, he had the urge, not to be a savior, not to be seen, but to do something real, something small, maybe, but powerful, the kind of action that didn't need to be posted or praised. So the next morning, he returned, not with coffee, not with a film crew or a press team, but with tools. In the trunk of his car were wooden planks, screws, a drill, and a blueprint he had drawn himself the night before, a ramp, carefully designed to blend with the aesthetic of the cafe, strong enough for a wheelchair, smooth enough for a child. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for applause. He just got on his knees and started working. The cafe owner, an old Italian man named Marco, came outside confused. But when he recognized who it was, and more importantly, what he was doing, he stepped back, watched silently, and then brought out a glass of lemonade. Passersby began to gather. Some took photos, others offered to help. Keanu barely spoke. He wiped the sweat from his brow and kept building. Every board, every screw, every angle was measured with care. By noon, the ramp was done. Keanu stood up, dusted off his jeans, and looked toward Elijah. The boy had been watching the whole time, his eyes wide, his fingers trembling. When Keanu rolled the wheelchair forward and gestured to the ramp, Elijah hesitated. Lila looked unsure, but she didn't stop him. And then, slowly, shakily, Elijah went up the ramp. There was no music, no camera flashes, just the soft wheels turning, the breath of the ocean, and the stunned silence of the crowd. Elijah reached the top, turned his chair, and for the first time in a very long time, he smiled, and something broke open inside him. Not a loud cry, not words, just a sound like the beginning of a laugh, like wind finding its way through dry leaves. Keanu smiled back. Looks good from up there, huh? He whispered. Lila covered her mouth and sobbed quietly. Marco stepped forward and said, "This ramp that stays." And just like that, everything changed. But what happened after this? What followed that? simple act of kindness would shake Hollywood, silence critics, and open doors that had been shut for decades, because the ramp was only the beginning. Asterisk the call that changed everything. Morning after Elijah climbed the ramp for the first time, Lila woke up to find her son already sitting by the window. His chair was turned toward the sunlight, his fingers curled loosely on the windowsill. She rubbed her eyes and yawned. "You okay, sweetheart?" Elijah didn't answer, but he turned to her and gave that same soft smile, the one he had discovered. On the ramp, Lila walked over and kissed his forehead. She didn't say much. There was a stillness in her heart, a trembling sort of gratitude, like a prayer left half-whispered. She didn't know what to call what had happened. All she knew was that for the first time in years, her son had come alive. They returned to the café that morning, and the ramp stood strong and beautiful, almost like it had always been there. Marco greeted them with a warm smile and said, "Your table's waiting inside." It was the first time Elijah had ever entered the café. The regulars clapped softly as he rolled through the door. Someone even offered to buy them breakfast. Lila tried to decline, but Marco insisted. "This one's on the house," he said. "Keanu already paid for the next 100 customers in your name." She blinked. "Wait, what?" He nodded. "He came back last night, quiet like a ghost, left money for everyone, said to keep the ramp, feed the boy, and never make a big deal out of it." But a big deal was already forming, because someone had taken a video that a tourist from Idaho had recorded Keanu building the ramp the day before. She didn't recognize him at first. She just thought it was beautiful, a stranger helping a disabled boy. When her daughter later pointed out who it was, she uploaded the video with the caption, "A man built a ramp for a boy in silence." Turns out it was Keanu Reeves. The video exploded overnight. By afternoon, it had reached over 5 million views. News outlets picked it up. Headlines popped up across the internet. Keanu's quiet act of kindness goes viral. The ramp that made the world pause, and Hollywood star forgets fame, builds hope instead. Keanu Reeves didn't respond. He didn't tweet. He didn't post. He didn't comment. He disappeared. Until his phone rang. It was a blocked number, and normally he wouldn't answer. But something told him to pick up. "Hello," the voice on the other end was soft, hesitant. "Is this Mr. Reeves?" "Yes." "Who's this?" "My name is Brenda Sato. I work for the National Association for Accessible Design. I just wanted to thank you. The ramp you built, it's inspired something huge. You don't know what you started." Keanu listened quietly. "We've had over 700 emails in the past 12 hours. People asking how they can help, how to build ramps, where to volunteer. Some are starting fundraisers. It's not just the ramp, it's the way you did it. No cameras, no ego, just kindness." Keanu said nothing at first. Then, finally, "I wasn't trying to inspire anyone, and that's why it worked," Brenda replied. He looked out the window. The sun was just starting to set. His mind wandered back to Elijah, the way the boy had smiled, the way the wheels turned slowly on the wooden slope, the tiny sound of joy cracking through years of silence. "What if," Keanu said slowly, "we built more ramps, no, more moments." There was a pause on the line. "I don't follow." "What if," he continued, "we created a project, not for headlines, not for likes, but to do things like this, simple things, quiet things, in places where people don't expect them. Schools, diners, parks, churches, wherever someone feels like they're left outside." Brenda was quiet. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, "Mr. Reeves, that might be the most important thing anyone said to me in 10 years. Keanu leaned back. His voice was soft but firm. "Let's talk tomorrow." After hanging up, he stared at the wall for a long time. Hollywood had never really understood him. To most people, he was just an action star, a man with a tragic past and a quiet demeanor. But moments like this, these were the real stories. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to write a new one. He didn't sleep that night. He opened a notebook and began writing ideas. He sketched more ramps, drafted outlines for a quiet foundation, and wrote one name at the top, Elijah. The next morning, he returned to the cafe acute. But this time, There were reporters outside. Keanu kept walking. Inside, Elijah was sipping on warm milk, his eyes bright. Lila sat next to him, hands wrapped around a paper cup. When she saw Keanu, she stood quickly. They've been waiting. Some even tried following us home. I'm sorry, Keanu said. She shook her head. Don't be. You gave my son something I haven't seen in years. Hope. Keanu smiled, then knelt beside Elijah. I want to ask you something, he said gently. Would it be okay if I used your name for something, a project, to help other kids like you? Elijah didn't speak, but he nodded. And that was enough. Keanu stood up, looked around the cafe, and turned to Marco. I need a quiet room. Marco smiled. Follow me. Within hours, Keanu Reeves had launched what would become one of the most quietly revolutionary movements in the country, and no one, not even him, could have guessed what was coming next, because someone else had been watching. And they weren't interested in kindness, they were interested in destroying it. The man in the gray suit. Days after the ramp was built, something shifted. The air around the small beachfront cafe felt different, heavier. More eyes were watching now. Reporters crowded the sidewalk. Curious strangers pretended to be customers just to catch a glimpse of Keanu. Elijah didn't understand why everyone suddenly cared. He just wanted to go back to sitting near the window with his milk. Keanu noticed the change too. He had never liked attention. He lived simply, rode the subway, held doors open, and left big tips. Kindness was supposed to be quiet. Now it felt loud, messy, out of his control. But he pressed on. With Brenda Sato's help, Keanu had already sketched out the beginning of the Elijah Initiative, a silent foundation aimed at building accessibility ramps in low-income areas, supporting disabled children, and promoting dignity over charity. No fanfare, just quiet impact. They had one goal: build 100 ramps in 100 days. Keanu planned to fund the first 50 himself. The next morning, before the cafe opened, Lila received a call. The voice was cold, smooth. Mrs. Amari, my name is Victor Langston. I represent Golden Path Holdings. We're investors in urban real estate. The property your cafe friend used for his ramp project is partially owned by one of our subsidiaries. Lila frowned. So, we'd like to request that it be removed. You want to tear down the ramp? It was built without formal permits. It violates code, and more importantly, it sets a precedent. If everyone starts building things out of kindness, where does that leave us? You're kidding, right? I assure you, I am not. We'll be sending a formal notice to the cafe. We expect the structure to be gone by week's end. Click. Lila stared at the phone in disbelief. When she told Keanu, his face tightened. This was not the first time he'd seen good things challenged by greed. Who is he? Keanu asked. He said Victor Langston, from Golden Path. Keanu's jaw set. He had heard of them. They were silent owners of hundreds of properties, always behind the scenes, always working through lawyers, loopholes, and intimidation. They didn't care about accessibility or children. They cared about control, about image, about property value. That afternoon, Marco, the cafe owner, confirmed it. They own a 30% silent stake. They never cared before. Now suddenly they want meetings, inspections, permits. I think your ramp scared them. Keanu nodded. Then we build more. But it wasn't that simple. The next day, contractors arrived. They had city badges, clipboards, and serious expressions. They measured, took photos, shook their heads, and muttered about liability. Lila watched helplessly. Can they take it down? They can, Keanu said, but not without noise. And so he called a friend, not an actor, not a lawyer, but a woman named Anita Gomez, a disability rights advocate who had once sued the city and won. She was fierce, brilliant, and didn't flinch around power. Anita arrived the next morning in jeans and sneakers, holding a file thick with laws, codes, and photos of the ramp. When the city inspector returned, she stepped forward calmly. Sir, she said, this ramp is compliant with California Code 1B405. The cafe is a public space, and by failing to provide access, it would be in violation of the ADA. Tearing this down would not only be a moral failure, It would be a legal one. The inspector hesitated, but before he could speak, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. A tall man in a gray suit stepped out. His hair was slicked back, his eyes sharp and calculating. Victor Langston. He walked slowly, his steps quiet, controlled. When he reached the edge of the ramp, he looked down at it as if it were a pile of garbage. "Mr. Reeves," he said. "We meet at last." Keanu said nothing. Victor smiled faintly. "You have a good heart, truly. But good hearts don't build cities. Discipline does. Order, structure. This ramp, it's not about a boy, it's about image. Now the media swarms. The city panics, and every owner from here to Chicago is asking, what will Keanu build next? That's not kindness, that's chaos." Keanu stepped forward, his voice steady. "You're wrong. This ramp wasn't built to make noise. It was built because a child couldn't enter a café." Victor's voice hardened. "It's a slope to anarchy. Anita stepped between them. You'll have to take it to court." Victor tilted his head. "You think court scares us?" Keanu looked him in the eyes. "No, but the truth should." Victor turned without another word and stepped back into his car. The battle had begun. Keanu didn't want to fight, but now it was no longer about one ramp. It was about whether kindness could stand against power. And in the middle of it all, a boy named Elijah watched quietly, not knowing that the world was already shifting in his name, because while Keanu built ramps, Victor was building something else. A trap, and no one saw it coming. The trap in the foundation. 3 days after Victor Langston's visit, the cafe felt different. Customers still came, the ramp still stood, and Elijah still smiled as he rolled in for warm milk every morning. But there was a tension in the air, like a rope pulled tight, waiting to snap. Keanu could feel it. He had faced many things in life: loss, loneliness, long nights of quiet pain. But this was something new. It wasn't just one greedy man. It was a system, polished in suits and paperwork, dressed in politeness, but hollow inside. They weren't trying to remove a ramp. They were trying to crush the idea behind it. Anita Gomez was busy preparing the legal side. Lila had stopped sleeping properly. Every night, she would check the bolts of the ramp herself, like a mother tucking in a child. Meanwhile, the Elijah Initiative had started gaining traction. Celebrities reposted the story. Local news channels covered updates. Volunteers showed up at the cafe offering help, wood, paint, and time. 3 more ramps had been built in nearby neighborhoods, one at a food pantry, one at a community library, and one at a low-income school. Every one of them was named Elijah's ramp. But then came the audit. A large white envelope arrived at Marco's cafe one morning. It was stamped with a city seal and marked urgent inspection notice. Inside was a list of violations: plumbing inconsistencies, improper ventilation, fire escape concerns, all from departments that hadn't visited in years. Marco read the list twice, his hands shaking. This isn't normal. They're targeting us." Keanu read the letter carefully. "They're trying to bury us in paper." Victor hadn't needed to tear down the ramp with a bulldozer. He was doing it with red tape. And then, a second envelope arrived. This one addressed to Keanu. It was from a high-end law firm in Los Angeles. The letter inside was polite, even complimentary. It congratulated him on his generous efforts, then warned of potential lawsuits should any ramps cause injury or fail to meet regional compliance codes. It ended with a line that chilled him: "We urge Mr. Reeves to reconsider unregulated construction, as the liabilities could be extensive, both financially and reputationally." Keanu put the letter down and sighed, but before he could even respond, something else happened, something worse. Early the next morning, Lila was on her way to drop off a donation of blankets at a nearby shelter when she saw it. The ramp had been defaced. Red spray paint covered the wood. One word: fraud. She dropped the bag of blankets and ran forward. Elijah wasn't with her, thank God. She stood there, shaking, as neighbors came to see what happened. Marco came out with a bucket of water. Someone brought soap. Keanu arrived 10 minutes later, his face unreadable. He looked at the ramp, the paint, the quiet shame in Lila's eyes, and he didn't say anything at first. Instead, He picked up a cloth, dipped it into the bucket, and began scrubbing. No cameras, no press, just silence. The word faded slowly under his hands. A young girl, maybe 15, joined in, then a man in construction boots, then to elderly women. Soon, there were over 20 people on their knees, scrubbing away the hate with quiet determination. And Elijah, he watched from across the street. Then, slowly, he began rolling toward them. His hands were slow, his face pale, but his eyes were clear. He stopped in front of the ramp, and for the first time in his life, in a voice barely louder than the wind, he spoke, "This is mine." Everyone froze. Laila dropped to her knees, tears already running down her face. "Baby, did you just—" Elijah looked at Keanu, then at the ramp, and said again, stronger this time, "This is mine." And Keanu, with the softest smile, replied, "Yes, yes it is." The next day, national news caught wind of the moment. Videos circulated of people cleaning the ramp, of Elijah speaking, of a city coming together. Victor Langston was furious. He had underestimated the power of something quiet. He thought kindness was weak, that it would retreat under pressure. Instead, it was growing. So he changed tactics. 2 nights later, a fake article appeared on a gossip site. Keanu Reeves accused of using child's disability to boost personal brand. Anonymous sources say it's all a PR stunt. Within hours, it spread across social media. Some fans defended him. Others hesitated. Keanu didn't flinch, but it hurt deeply. He had spent years staying out of the spotlight, never chasing fame. Now, one story, a lie, threatened to undo everything. Anita was livid. "We know it's coming from Victor's people. They planted it. They want to scare you off." But Keanu remained calm. "Then we give them nothing to fear." "What do you mean?" "We keep building. We build 10 more ramps this week." "Keanu, let them see what kindness does when it's cornered." And so they built ramp after ramp, each one painted soft blue, Elijah's favorite color. They wrote messages on the sides: "You matter. You are not alone. You are welcome here." People from all walks of life joined the movement: artists, builders, parents, veterans, nurses. One man drove from Nevada just to hammer in a nail. Keanu worked beside them all. No stage, no speeches. Just wood, screws, and purpose. But Victor Langston wasn't done. In a dark office tower high above the city, he stared at a wall of photographs. Keanu, Elijah, the café, the ramps. His fingers tapped against the table. "You think this is a story," he muttered, "but stories can be rewritten." Then he leaned toward his assistant. "Find something on the boy's mother, anything. I want her past, her debts, her failures. We bring the whole thing down." And with that, the trap was set, not against the ramps, not even against Keanu, but against Lila, the one person neither of them could afford to lose. Because the next headline wouldn't be about kindness. It would be about shame. Digging up the past. It was a Friday morning when the first headline appeared. Single mother of disabled boy caught in welfare fraud case 5 years ago. Is Hollywood hero backing a liar? The article ran with an old mugshot of Lila from a time she thought was buried forever. Her eyes in the photo were hollow. She looked younger, thinner, and lost. The piece described her as a woman who once lied to the system and hinted that the ramp and Keanu's involvement might be part of a larger manipulation campaign. They didn't mention that the case had been dismissed. They didn't say she had been falsely accused by her former employer at the diner. They didn't say that Lila had spent her last few dollars hiring a public defender to clear her name. They didn't say that the same month the case was dismissed, her son had undergone emergency surgery that nearly took his life. They didn't say any of that. They just printed the headline, and the internet did the rest. Keanu was in the middle of helping install a ramp outside a community music center when Brenda rushed over, phone in hand. "Keanu, it's bad. They're attacking Lila." He read the headline. His eyes didn't move for several seconds. Finally, he spoke. "How's Elijah?" "He doesn't know yet. Make sure it stays that way." But by nightfall, it was everywhere. Keanu walked into the cafe just before closing. Lila sat at a corner table, staring at the mugshot on her phone screen. Her hands trembled. She didn't look up when he sat across from her. "They're going to think I used you," she whispered. "They're going to think this was a trick. They'll turn everything into poison." Keanu didn't reply at first. He reached across the table and took her hand. "You survived worse," he said. Tears ran silently down her face. "They won't stop, Keanu. They'll dig deeper. They'll hurt us, then we don't give them silence." She looked at him, confused. "You told your truth once. In court," he said. "But this time, you tell it in your voice. We do one interview. Just one. Not to defend, to show them who you are. Not the mugshot. Not the rumor. You." Lila shook her head. "I can't. I'm not like you. I don't speak well. I get nervous. What if they twist my words?" Keanu leaned in gently. "Then we don't use words." And so, 2 days later, they released a video, not to the media, not through press agencies, just on a quiet YouTube channel titled Elijah's Voice. The video was only 3 minutes long. It showed Lila sitting next to Elijah on the cafe's ramp. No script, no makeup, no music. Just her voice. "My name is Lila Amari. I'm a mother. My son Elijah was born different. He doesn't speak much, but he watches everything. When I couldn't afford lawyers, I stood alone in a courtroom and proved I didn't steal anything. I work double shifts, and I don't ask for sympathy. I ask for space. Space for my son to live like any other child. And a man gave us a ramp, not because of fame, not for cameras, just because it was the right thing to do. If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they should ask why." Elijah placed his small hand on her arm and gave a soft smile. The video ended there. It went viral within hours. Celebrities reposted it. Teachers shared it in classrooms. Advocacy groups called it one of the most dignified responses in recent memory. And for once, the internet fought back, not with hate, but with overwhelming support. #RamTruth started trending. People began sharing their own stories of being shamed, judged, or misunderstood. The cafe overflowed with messages. But Victor Langston wasn't done. He had bet everything on discrediting Laila. And now, his plan was falling apart. He stood in his downtown office, surrounded by silence. Outside his window, the city glittered, indifferent to his anger. She flipped the story. He muttered. He flipped the whole thing. His assistant entered the room. "Sir, there's something else." "What?" "We've traced the donations." "What?" "Donations, the Elijah Initiative. Turns out, Mr. Reeves didn't just pledge money. He donated land. In your neighborhood." Victor turned sharply. "What land?" "3 abandoned lots. Next to your firm's flagship development. They've already filed permits to turn them into inclusive playgrounds." Victor's face went cold. They weren't just building ramps anymore. They were building symbols. Symbols too close to home. Keanu had turned the battle into a message, but Victor wasn't ready to surrender. So he called in someone else. A private investigator. "Dig deeper," he ordered. "Not on her. Not on the boy. On him, Reeves. Yes. Find something, anything. I don't care if it's 20 years old." The investigator nodded. But as he left the office, he glanced at his phone. He had watched the video of Lila, and Elijah too, and something about it stayed with him. A voice inside whispered, "How far are you willing to go to destroy kindness?" But orders were orders, and so the final chapter began to unfold. Because while Keanu built ramps with his hands, someone was digging through his past with claws. And what they uncovered would either end everything, or ignite something no one could stop. The thing they didn't expect. The private investigator's name was Simon Hale. He had worked quietly behind the scenes for 15 years, digging into celebrities, politicians, even priests. But something about this assignment unsettled him. It wasn't the target, it was the motive. He sat in his office late at night, going through records on Keanu Reeves. Everything was clean. The man didn't even own a mansion. He lived modestly, gave generously, and kept to himself. Simon found no lawsuits, no scandals, no secret deals. Every donation was real. Every visit to a children's hospital, unannounced. Every dollar given, unpublicized. He called Victor Langston. "I have nothing," Victor growled. "Then look harder." But Simon didn't. Instead, he closed the file and made a choice. He sent one anonymous email to a reporter with a single sentence: maybe stop digging through dirt and start building ramps. The next day, the story flipped again. Private investigator walks away from smear job. Calls Keanu Reeves a builder of light. It broke the internet. People who had been silent started speaking up. An old waitress told the story of how Keanu once helped her pay rent without telling anyone. A nurse shared how he had sat with her dying father for 2 hours during a hospital visit. A firefighter recalled how Keanu personally paid for his kids' therapy after a tragic fire. It wasn't just one ramp. It was a life of quiet kindness suddenly laid bare. And Victor? His plan crumbled. Under pressure from public outrage and legal notices from disability advocates, Golden Path Holdings pulled out of the café stake. A city councilman visited the site, declared the ramp a model for accessible inclusion, and gave it permanent clearance. But Keanu didn't stop there. He bought an old train station in East Los Angeles and turned it into a learning and support center for disabled children. The first mural on the wall was a painting of Elijah, arms outstretched, smiling at the top of the ramp. He called it the starting line. Meanwhile, Lila received dozens of job offers from advocacy groups and non-profits, but she turned them down. "I just want to be Elijah's mom," she said softly. Elijah's voice returned slowly, not in full, but enough. He began reading books aloud, practicing poems, whispering jokes. The doctors called it a miracle. Lila called it justice. One afternoon, Keanu sat beside Elijah outside the cafe, watching the waves. The boy turned to him and asked a question that caught him by surprise. "Why did you build it?" Keanu looked at him, then out toward the ocean. "Because someone once told me that pain isolates people, makes them feel like they're locked out, and kindness is the key." Elijah nodded. "You have the key now too," Keanu added. "Me?" "Yes, because you showed the world what happens when we stop waiting for permission to help." And then Elijah did something unexpected. He stood only for a second, only with help. But it was enough. The crowd at the cafe gasped. Lila burst into tears. Marco dropped a tray of glasses. Keanu didn't move, just watched with tears in his eyes. And in that small moment, no headline mattered. No lie, no lawsuit, no smear. Just a boy, standing tall. The next morning, a final article ran in the local paper, From Ramp to Revolution, How a Boy, a Mother, and an Actor Changed a City. But for Keanu, it wasn't a revolution. It was a reminder that every ramp, whether made of wood or words, could lift someone out of silence. And that sometimes all it takes to change the world is to build a way in.